Good evening, everyone. We're so glad to have you here, and welcome to the 6th annual Open Studio Night. For those of you who don't know us well, Studio 20 is a graduate program that I direct. It's focused on innovation in journalism, and it's digital first and user-centric. We emphasize project-based learning with our media partners. I sometimes describe Studio 20 as sort of like a consulting group that gets paid in problems. And our graduates have taken that phrase, paid in problems, and they made that the name of their Facebook group, paid in problems. So we ask our media partners to give us custody of a juicy problem that we can dig into and research and hopefully solve for them. Like one of tonight's problems, how do you launch the Huffington Post in China when you have the Great Firewall to contend with? That's a good problem. And we have some very high quality partners, as you can see if you take a look at the program which we made for you. The work you're going to hear about tonight started with good, juicy problems that our media partners donated to us. They donate us the problem, we donate them the solutions. Everybody learns and everybody wins. And so tonight is the culmination of that. Our program tonight consists of 9 short presentations by our graduating students that are sitting over there. Then we're going to have a brief news announcement, breaking news announcement. And then Josh Benton, the director of Nieman Lab, is going to do his annual slideshow called The Year in Innovation in Journalism, which is what Nieman Lab, if you know it, writes about and studies the entire year. Then you can stay and drink with us if you'd like. So this group here is friends and family of our graduating students. It's people from our partner organizations. It's people from the digital journalism community of New York. And it's also people who follow me on Twitter and said, beg to come, which is always cool. The hashtag is hashtag Studio 20, and we are almost ready for our first presenter. So that person would be wise to come up now. We certainly encourage tweeting. These presentations are on the record. They are the result of at least 4 months and often more like 6 months of work. And they are entirely the design of the students who are presenting. We help them find partners or they find them on their own. And then they come up with the project and we guide them through. Fernanda, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
The floor is yours.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here to present my graduate project, Mrs. Vertigo. Mobile phones are with us everywhere we go. They're present in the good and bad moments of our lives, and we feel very attached to them. But the way we experience news on our phones has yet a lot to improve. It is common to look at our screens and see things like this. Crammed and small images, overflow of information, it's a bad user experience. Usually, newsrooms are not thinking information to be mobile first. And here, I say that mobile first is vertical first, because we hold our phones vertically. That's what feels natural for us. When we design content for mobile, we should design for portrait and not landscape mode. That's what I mean by vertical first. My project experimented with images, videos, and charts to understand how to adapt content for a mobile vertical screen. The purpose of this research was to increase what I call vertical literacy in newsrooms and implement a best practice guide for journalists to introduce this type of content in their workflow. The amount of mobile phones in the world has been growing significantly, as well as the amount of people that access news on these devices. Around 50% of smartphone users in the UK and US already access news via mobile phones, which is an increase of almost 20% only in the past 3 years. Social networks have been not only pushing newsrooms to gather content on smartphones, they're also pressing them to design content to be vertical. Snapchat and now Instagram stories have been leading the way. The Financial Times is aware of this trend and decided to partner with me to make this project happen. The research involved the production of 10 Instagram stories to understand how to think content to be displayed on a vertical screen and how the FT audience would react to it. Before going deep into the research, I want to show you how Instagram stories work. Stories live inside the Instagram app. The circles on the top are accounts you can click to see a story. You can click on the right to go forward, on the left to go backwards. You can also hyperlink a slide. You swipe up and go to a web page. I have learned a lot with this research, and here are some key takeaways. First, I'm going to talk about the design. The most difficult part of this research was to think how to arrange content for a vertical screen. So every time I was producing a new story, I kept asking myself, how do users want content to be displayed on their phones? This question helped me focus on the main goal of this research, which is to improve users' experience on their mobile phones. I also learned how difficult it is to design for different screen sizes. This table, for example, shows the different resolutions for 3 iPhone models. Now imagine having to think for all types of smartphones in the world. Practically, what I did on Premiere, which was my editing platform, was to use the resolution of the iPhone 6s and concentrate the most important information in the inner rectangle, as you can see on this image. Also, in vertical, less is more. Let's look at this example. I took these screenshots from a story I did about women in Wisconsin that voted for Trump. The first image is how it appeared on Instagram. The second image, how it appeared in the FT website. And what matters here is her interview. It's what she talks about the president-elect, how she behaves during it, and this lady talks about Trump with a lot of emotion. And you can see the emotion much clearer on the vertical cut. First, her face, her eyes are closer to ours, makes it easier to connect with her. And second, and most importantly, there are no distractions. There's no table or American flag or guy in the background to distract the user from what really matters in this story. This research also helped the FT and I understand about audience behavior on Instagram stories. There was an average of 40% completion rate, which means that around 40% of the people that clicked to see the story finished it. And also, we had around 400 people swiping up on Instagram stories to go to the FT page. This proved to be another really good way to drive traffic to the website. Now, something interesting that I observed about the story's performances. Half the posts that I worked on were related to politics. If we compare the political ones with the feature stories, the political ones had better completion rates. However, viewers appreciated when we delivered beautifully crafted images and unique storylines. They sent us many more praising messages when we posted these featured stories. Here are some of the messages that we received. The second is by far my favorite. The user seems very impressed by how the FT is using Instagram stories. Therefore, both political and feature stories are relevant for the audience, and newsrooms should balance them together in the platform. Not only we received positive messages, the Financial Times Instagram following had a significant increase during this research. This proves that keeping a constant and innovative presence in this platform helps to attract followers. No doubt that mobile phones have become a standard platform to get news, and because of the closeness we share with these devices, the way we display information has also to be adapted to sustain this relationship. Social networks have been helping journalists to maximize storytelling on mobile, and the more we experiment with content, the easier it will be to make a successful transition to the vertical screen. May we leave here today with our phones in hand, planning our next steps to shift how we address news from a horizontal to a vertical first approach. Thank you all for coming here tonight. I would also like to thank my family and friends, Jake, Alyssa, and Lila from the FT, Zoe, Jay, and my incredible classmates. If you want to continue the conversation around vertical content, shoot me a tweet or an email. Thank you.
While we're getting ready for the next presentation, I traditionally make a few remarks about the one we just heard. And for Fernandez, I want to point out that Studio 20 is increasingly a global program. We draw people from all over the world, but as our network of graduates grows, we also have people working around the world. And Fernandez's project began when one of our graduates, who's working on the social media team in London for the Financial Times, said, we need some projects. And it's the fact that we have graduates around the world now that we can also start to do projects around the world. We have a couple of those to share with you today. Igor, who's from Brazil. Are you ready?
Yes, I am. Hello, everyone. I'm Igor Carrasco, and this is Elly, my final project for Studio 20 with the Wall Street Journal as my partner. This is the Wall Street Journal newsroom. More precisely, it's the part of it known as the hub. It's the central nervous system of the whole operation where editors decide what goes into push notifications, the front page, the app, and social media. Every Friday, the people in charge of social media have to get ready for the weekend, when staff and content output is lower. This process takes at best a couple of hours, sometimes involving more than one person, and is done manually. It consists of scheduling articles that did well during the week and will still be relevant. First things that came to mind when observing this process was it takes a disproportionate amount of time to get over with, around 2 to 3 hours depending on the person, and there's hardly an effective way to do it. It was also one of the situations where content got surfaced again, and it took a lot of effort to find the appropriate stories to do it. This led me to the insight that there were a lot of articles in the massive output of the journal that were being simply underutilized because of the lack of an easy way to find them. The Wall Street Journal, as other media properties, needed to do a better job to extract value from existing articles. Take a look at these two charts. They come from the New York Times Innovation Report from 2 years ago. On the top, the percentage of views on the typical Times story measured by time. As you can see, most of it happens on the first few days after publishing. The second chart shows an example of evergreen, a story that generates views and remains relevant for users long into the future. A high-quality story read means a chance of converting a regular reader into a subscriber and also brings in some ad dollars. This is what I'm doing with Elly. I built a tool that closes the cracks through which good content is lost by keeping it in a place where it's readily accessible, searchable, and filterable. It also makes it easy to surface back up again. In case you're wondering and the icon didn't tip you, the name comes from elephant because, as you all know, an elephant never forgets. This is how it works. A script taps into the analytics platform being used by the publisher, in this case Parsley, to find the articles and stores them into a database. That database is accessed through a web application in which the editor can see all the most recently added stories, filter by section, or search by keyword. After selecting the stories that fit editorial criteria, the journalist can publish them to social media, which is done via social flow. As you can see, it's all very simple, meant to be straightforward and easy to use. The most important part of it is running in the background. It's what's feeding the database. As the Wall Street Journal is a huge organization, we needed to make this run with as little human intervention as possible. Training dozens of editors to manually add stories to this tool was out of the question. My initial hypothesis after spending part of the summer working at the journal and keeping an eye on metrics was that doing well for 2 days in a row seemed like a good indicator of evergreen potential. Looking at it on Parsley, their traffic would look like the 2 bar charts you see on the bottom here. And how did that pan out? It works. The hypothesis was proved partially right. After some time analyzing what the algorithm fed into that database, I had to make some changes. Turns out that pretty much every big story does well for 2 days in a row at the journal, in part due to the audience profile that is that of a global organization. Currently, stories that are doing well for at least 3 days in a row are fed into the system. In parsley chart terms, the stories that look like those at the bottom. Also, after experimenting with just that one rule, I realized that articles from sections that have a high density of evergreen, such as life and culture, weren't being registered, as they weren't generating enough traffic to reach the overall top 15 of most viewed articles. I therefore started breaking down those sections in particular so that we could get those articles. And it's been working pretty well. In future development, it seems to me that treating all particular sections like that will yield even better results. During development of the user-facing part of this project, execution has been improved several times over, using feedback from people at the journal to ensure that the tool would be useful for and usable by editors. On top is how it started out. At the bottom is how it's looking right now. Features were included to help inform editorial decisions, such as the incorporation of analytics and publish dates. In conclusion, it's very important that news companies take advantage of the opportunities that come from having longer living content in the digital space. There's money to be made and users to be served by using evergreen more efficiently. And it is possible to automatically harvest that content, though parameters can always be improved. And getting back to the weekend scheduling thing that started out all of this, according to early testing, Elly helps cut time spent doing it by order of at least a half, depending on who's doing it, and also helps with the variety of articles being resurfaced. If you work in audience engagement or anywhere in media, you know how useful it would be to have a tool like this. The code is available publicly on the GitHub on your screen. If you think that's interesting for you, grab it, take a look. If you're interested, drop me a line. You can see my email on the screen right now, or just message me on Twitter. I would first like to thank my wife, Gabi. Without you, I would not have been able to keep it together. I would also like to thank Todd, Carla, Tyler, and Erin from the journal for the opportunity, time devoted, and thoughtful input. And finally, to my Studio 20 professors and awesome colleagues. Thank you all.
Thank you, Igor. Many of my students can complete this sentence. The simplest way to add value is to save the user time. And that's what Igor did in his project. That's one of the reasons I'm so excited about it. I also teach them a formula for innovation that Ev Williams, the founder of Twitter and several other successful companies, has. He says, if you want to create innovation, take something people already want to do and remove steps. And that's what Igor did in his project with Elly. He removed steps for surfacing evergreen content. Steve, are you ready?
Let's go.
It's yours.
My name is Steeve Roso, and I'm going to show you a video.
It's all on shots. He picks up one and goes back for more. He has no grenades. Luminosity in overtime. He's looking for the shot. Shot's going to pick up one more. Triple for him. Oh, yeah, the question. Are you kidding with Johnson? He gets every single one and keeps the dream alive.
You just watched a clip from a game called Counter-Strike Global Offensive. Welcome to esports. What is esports? Professional competitive video gaming. It may be one of the world's best kept secrets. Many people know of it, but a lot of people don't have any idea what it is. Among millennials, esports is as popular as baseball and ice hockey, with 22% watching it. The industry is expected to grow at a rate of 30% in the following 5 years. The tournaments, where gamers play incredibly popular games which are projected onto massive screens, are held in gigantic stadiums, with thousands watching live, and millions watch on their own computers, from home. Let's emphasize this point a little bit. The population of the United States is around 325 million. The number of people who follow esports is around 300 million. Soon, esports is expected to surpass America in population. That's no small feat for this new virtual world. And journalism is no stranger to virtual experiences. When we think of VR and its applications to journalism, the majority of the products that come to mind revolve around footage shot by a 360 camera, with the user given the freedom to observe freely his surroundings and get an immersive experience that couldn't be achieved before the technology came along. You wear your VR glasses, and suddenly you're in the middle of the scene. This is a fantastic medium that the users will come to experience more and more when dealing with the news that take place in the world outside our windows. And as time goes by, more people will be getting VR headsets every day, letting everyone experience the real world in this thrilling manner. But the real world isn't the only world that journalism covers. My project, for which I partner with the Daily Dot, takes VR and implements into the coverage of esports, which itself exists in a virtual world. My product is the method of presenting esports highlights to be watched with VR glasses, as if you're right there in the middle of the action. Here you can see a spectator watching the highlight I just showed you with VR glasses using my product. This is only a flat clip of what he's seeing, but he is right there in the middle of the virtual world, surrounded by the gunfire and the action. He's part of that world, not ours. The product gives you an immersive and unique experience. With it, we're not around you, but the game's characters are. If you're interested in watching what I built with VR glasses as it's intended, feel free to say hi after the presentation. This bad boy will be with me. Like all other sports, esports has its own branch of journalism. Coverage of esports events is one of the key topics of interest of that branch. Visit the Facebook page of any esports division of a news organization, and you'll see highlights of the games, videos showing the atmosphere in the stadiums, and all sorts of visuals that do their best to make you experience the events to their fullest. If you're a football fan, you would remember this iconic moment, the helmet catch, a fantastic play that led to the Giants' game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl of 2008, bringing the team the victory against the Patriots. Wouldn't it be beautiful if you could watch that highlight as if you're in the middle of the field and see the ball fly over your head? With my project, I tried to create an experience that brings uniqueness and excitement to esports coverage and utilize the virtual nature of esports in a way that cannot be realized for other sports, at least for now. Through my experience, I found a few things. Firstly, people are already working on developing different types of coverage for esports, some of which revolve around 360 technologies as well. Although VR is new, it's not that new. The days of showing people a not so high quality VR product and expecting them to be amazed have passed. People now have professional gears and have seen a few professional products. So if one's going to tackle VR, one better do it well. Thirdly, watching your favorite game as part of the action is quite cool. And it's a method that I strongly believe needs to be expanded upon. Live esports presents you the 3D world of the games on a flat 2D screen. For this, 360 coverage is perfect. And I have a few suggestions for the future coverage of esports. Esports exist in a virtual world. As attempted in my project, this brings a lot of possibilities that journalists can pursue. And as the industry is growing, and as the world is constantly creating crazy technologies, it's a very good idea to tackle the opportunity of covering esports in ways traditional sports cannot be covered. Another interesting idea is to make products that are tailored to be viewed in-game. So basically, take journalism into the games. For example, the entire data of all matches exist, and all the matches can be recreated within the game. What if you put the gamers in the shoes of the professional players at the very moment of the iconic plays and challenge them to do what the professional players accomplished? Think of the highlight clip I showed at the beginning of the presentation. The audience can be put in the position of the player who won the round and actively take part in the highlight. The opportunities at this point are many, and it's up to us to discover them. I highly believe that as more and more journalists start experimenting with esports coverage, many unique and beautiful products will come to life. And finally, when dealing with software as complicated as video games, it's hard to meddle with and manipulate your material. It's hard to create new products from existing sophisticated programs. So my advice to anyone who wants to tackle esports coverage in experimental ways is that you better get in touch with the developers of the game. Without their help, everything is quite difficult. But on the other hand, this would mean getting help from the people behind the game when covering the game. It is up for debate whether losing your independence in this way is good journalistic practice or not. There's new territory, and new territory is exciting. You'll be hearing about professional video gaming more and more as time goes by, and eventually it'll stop sounding so very weird. Take a look at it when you have time. Perhaps all of a sudden you will find yourself cheering for a gigantic blue demon controlled by a Swedish player trying to take down a fire monster controlled by a Korean gamer. And maybe, just maybe, you'll do it with a VR headset on. I would like to thank these lovely people for all their incredible help and support in making this project come to life. See you later. If you need me, we can meet in the darkest corners of the web. Or you can shoot me an email, but the first one is more fun. Thank you.
Steve is one of our most creative students ever. I want you to understand how cool his project is. People go to Madison Square Garden and places like it to watch expert players play video games. 20,000 people may be in the audience. Steve's proposal is to report on that, sports journalism, using VR technology. That is a very creative and innovative idea. Jiang, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
The floor is yours.
Hello, everyone. Before I start my presentation, I want to show you guys a video clip first. The video shows how some journalists react when their first-time virtual reality experience.
It's just black right now. So why not I'm legally blind? It's still just a blur. I don't know what you're talking about. Step backwards. That's actually interesting. You get it through the dark.
Virtual reality was first introduced into journalism world in the year 2012 by Noni De La Pina with her story Hunger in Los Angeles. In 2015, some news organizations published their first virtual reality stories. No one wants to be left behind this wave, afraid that others might get into this first and take the advantage. And the year 2016 is seen as a crucial point determining whether virtual reality can be a reliable tool or just a passing trend. The VR works we talk about here are mostly 360 video. But facing the innovation can never be easy. Take the video you saw at the beginning as an example. It's not easy to produce or even watch a VR piece. When journalists start to build a VR story, there are so many questions coming up, and this list of questions can go on and on. My project, Clear the Mist, is here to help one specific news organization to find answers for those questions, to clear the mist on the way to achieve better journalism using virtual reality. My partner, Frontline PBS, has been producing documentaries for over 30 years and won almost every major journalism and broadcasting awards. This is the picture I took when I first visited their office. It really shocked me when I first saw it. Since their first VR piece, Ebola Outbreak, came out late 2015, Frontline has published these 6 virtual reality pieces by now, most of which are 360 video. And now supported by Knight Foundation, they started work with VR production company, Emblematic Group, on 3 stories now, which are not only limited to 360 video, but trying to build more interactivity in virtual environments. The whole idea of my project started when I worked with Frontline on this piece called Return to Chernobyl this April. I was in charge of shooting and part of the editing. That was the first time I realized how different, how difficult it is to produce a VR content, and I want to explore more into that. I focused my project mainly on interviews with Frontline editors, filmmakers who work with them, and people from Emblematic Group. Luckily, I was also able to attend some of their story meetings. During the interview, I put my focus mainly on following 3 parts. What is Frontline? How about the VR works they've already done, and what they can improve in the future? Here are some key features I found about Frontline and their VR. They value character-driven narrative pieces. They value quality more than quantity. And they are visual thinkers based on their long history dealing with documentary. In terms of VR, they are not satisfied with only the immersion experience, but also need to layer in some intelligence, investigative journalism. They don't need to be the leader in VR world, but sees VR more as an additional tool to tell a better story for them. Here comes to my main findings about what challenged them most in VR production. First, deep storytelling can be difficult in VR. Frontline is dealing with long-form documentary for a long time, but most of the VR works are short, so they are hesitant to super condensing everything. Secondly, some of the best work in VR are done in the field, and you can't do much about it in editing room. That requires a lot of pre-production works, and you need to make important editorial decisions beforehand. Some new technologies in VR include a lot of computer-generated scenes and recreation. But in journalism world, people don't make things up. so they need to be very cautious about not trick the audience. Based on my study, I came up with following suggestions, which are divided into 3 parts. During the interviews, they all mentioned choosing the right story for VR is so important. So I came up with this checklist of choosing a qualified VR story idea. Here I highlight the first 3 points I think are most important. Location and environment is the key of good VR story. The most intriguing point of VR is the audience can get into a place that they never had a chance to be in real world. But only have a cool place is not good enough. The story itself needs to have some levels of interaction. Here, interaction can mean dropping off bags from the sky in a 360 video, or the audience is able to pick up a book from the ground in a computer-generated scene. A strong character can be more important here than it is in a linear film. A good character will lead the audience into the flow of telling a story without getting them lost in the 3D world. As I mentioned before, Frontline is struggling with computer-generated skill, which challenge the accuracy and transparency in journalism. But this new technology, photogrammetry, can be a good solution to that dilemma. It involves using photos taken from different positions and angles and creating a 3D model. To put it another way, you can build a virtual space based on the photos you took. It brings realistic details as well as ability for interaction. Frontline has started to use this in their new stories, but I would highly recommend them to do more. I have an example of this set up in our Studio 20 room, and if you have interest, you can let me know after this. Audio is not getting enough attention in VR so far. VR isn't only about vision. It's a complete experience that includes sound. And the best practice so far in VR is spatial audio, which brings you into the place and you can tell the direction of the sound you heard, just like you do in reality world. When you risk missing a key point by looking around, a loud noise will directly guide you back. Frontline has been doing pretty well in exploring virtual reality, and based on my findings, I gave the suggestion for improvement. The key is to find the right story, take audiences to the place they never get a chance to be in real world, building immersive experience with interactivity, embracing new technology without harming the journalistic value. As I mentioned at the beginning, this year is seen as a key year in determining the future of VR. As far as I can see, it has bright future in journalism. Thanks to those people who helped and supported me for this project. I can never get this done without your help. And if you have any interest or questions about virtual reality, please let me know. Here is where you can reach me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Jiang. I hope you heard that if you want to take a look at a VR piece, connect with Jiang after and he can show you a little bit of it. His project is a good example of what I said about getting paid in problems. The problem he took on was what is a smart virtual reality strategy, not for journalism overall, but for one organization, Frontline, headquartered in Boston with a great documentary tradition. And he gave them the answer. Here's a smart strategy for Frontline. Felly, are you ready?
Yes.
Go.
Good evening, everyone. I'm here to present my project Compass, a user-centered analytics dashboard I have been working on with my partners at Quartz. I want to start by reading something that a journalist said early on during my research. Honestly, I almost never check the analytics on my stories because those metrics focus on traffic and not on serving my readers. A lot of journalists feel this way about analytics because even though media companies have made it a point to be data-driven, a lot of emphasis has been placed on page views and its evil twin, unique visits. And these metrics are useful, but they are mostly geared towards the needs of media companies that want to know their reach in order to sell ads and optimize their performance. But honestly, they do very little to help journalists with their job. So I decided to take on this problem and explore what a user-centered analytics would look like. And what do I mean by user-centered analytics? Well, while traditional analytics are focused on traffic, performance, and short-term optimization, user-centric metrics should be guided by this one fundamental question. What are my users trying to accomplish, and what metrics might actually help them? My partner for this project was Quartz. We set out to develop a user-centric analytics dashboard for their very recently launched chart-building platform, Atlas. Atlas is a platform for creating, publishing, and sharing charts. You can think about it as being something like a Pinterest for charts. Users can create their own charts with their own data, publish them on the platform, and sort through charts created by other users. All the charts published can be shared by anyone on social media and other websites. Most people using Atlas right now are Quartz journalists, but the platform was recently open for external users. So I set out to develop Compass for the many journalists and the other users who are building and publishing charts on Atlas. The first thing I needed to do was get to know who these users are and what are their goals with Atlas. And the first thing I found was that when I asked users about their interest in metrics, I actually mostly received very discouraging answers. Users seemed to feel wary of data analytics and weren't sure if they would use them for Atlas. However, when I reframed my questions and I stopped asking them about metrics and started asking them what questions they might have about their readers, the response was completely different. This led to my first discovery and one of the fundamental principles guiding the design of Compass. Journalists are not interested in metrics, but they are interested in learning more about the readers. Therefore, the challenge is not providing users with the information that we are technically capable of tracking, but providing them with insightful data. That is, data that answers real questions that they have and that they can act upon. So the first thing I did was reframe traditional metrics in terms of real questions. So for example, the metric click referrals, in this case is given the proper context by framing it as, how are my readers finding my work? And the second thing I did was explore some different metrics that might help Atlas users. For example, where are my readers? Journalists who cover the global economy, like Quartz, might want to see in what countries they are impacting the most. Top 10 popular topics will allow journalists to see not just what articles got the most views, but which subtopics are the most popular amongst their readers. And what are users on Atlas looking for works as a trending topics for Atlas. Since Atlas actually has a search bar, we can track what people are looking for on the platform. And by providing journalists with this information, we can help them find inspiration for ideas or help them form a better understanding of who the readers behind Atlas are. The second big discovery that came up during research was that Atlas users are actually very different and have very different goals. Even though most users of Atlas today are journalists, since the platform has opened up, we are finding other sets of users, such as marketers and researchers. And they actually have very different needs and uses for metrics. So it's important to give the platform some flexibility to adapt to different needs. Finally, all of this came together for the first prototype of Compass that I'm going to show you. This is how it works. Users will be able to go to their profiles where they can click on Insights. This will take them to their Insights dashboard where they can see a series of charts. The dashboard is designed in a way like a deck of cards where each card is a specific metric. All these metrics are framed and contextualized in terms of questions. And there they can select which cards are the most useful to them and mark them as their favorites. Once they have their favorites, they can easily make sure that these metrics are the ones that will display on the top. In closing, what I would like to say is that Compass might just be a product for a specific platform, but it is also an exploration on how to transform data into powerful insight. And the lessons learned during my research can be extended beyond Atlas. And these are my main takeaways. Start by understanding who your users are. This will allow you to focus not on the data, but on the user's needs. Designing analytics systems and dashboards, we should remember that the purpose of metrics should be to truly help your users accomplish goals. Provide your users with proper context by framing metrics in terms of actual questions that they might actually have. And finally, be bold. Explore unconventional metrics. Data can also be used to help your journalists discover interesting things about their own work, find inspiration for new ideas, and get a better understanding of their own readers. Thank you very much to everyone who has helped me, my husband, my family, my friends who are here, my colleagues at Quartz, especially Hillary, Josh, and Zach, my professors at Studio 20, and my amazing classmates. If anybody wants to talk more about the possibilities of user-centric analytics, please reach out. I love talking about this. Thank you.
Thank you, Feli. What I love the most about Feli's project is that her partner, Quartz, hired her full time. Which is a good time to remind you that most of these other students are looking for jobs. If you need them, they need you. Ava, are you ready?
Yes.
Take it away.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Eva Riviere. I worked on my project Yesterday's News with ProPublica and the NYU Library. If you lived in Chicago in 2006 and you wanted to know what types of crimes were occurring in your neighborhood, you would visit chicagocrime.org. When you got there, you'd see something like this image. You'd then go on to investigate and satisfy all of your curiosities. Today, however, if you go to chicagocrime.org, this is all you'll see. The fuzzy image from the previous slide and memories are almost all that's left of this innovative work. Chicago Crime was created in 2005 by Adrian Holovati and is considered in the industry as one of the most innovative news apps of the time. It won a Batten Award for Innovation in Journalism in the year of its creation. However, only 3 years later, it disappeared due to tech changes in Amazon Web Services. Yesterday's News is a look at the technology that is used to create news apps and how we as an industry can preserve them. We shouldn't go any further into the discussion of this project without making it clear what a news app is. News apps are web applications that are built on top of databases and give users the power to explore important data in a way that is most relevant to them. This is a screenshot of ProPublica's Dollars for Docs, which we used for this study. It is an app that lets users research their doctor to see if they receive money from pharmaceutical companies and how that might influence the type of medications they prescribe. So why is news app preservation such a challenge? News apps, as with anything dynamic on the web, are heavily dependent on libraries and frameworks that are either constantly updated or stop being maintained. And these libraries and frameworks are dependent on other libraries and frameworks with the same issue. This is called dependency hell. And another issue is link rot, which is the process by which hyperlinks on a website point to pages, sites, or servers that are no longer available. On average, this will happen to a link within about 44 days. Obviously, librarians and archivists have a vested interest in this problem, as they want to preserve journalism in the interest of history. However, to the developers who build these applications, more technical needs arise. Understanding the process, infrastructure, and technology can help news developers build on the innovations of their predecessors, and without it, major milestones and building blocks in innovation are lost. In order to tackle this problem, we started at the beginning with an exploration of what a news app actually is from a technical perspective, to understand what needs to be preserved in order to better approach the second issue. The technical analysis involved in exploring what news apps exist, what types of technologies were used to build them, what the significant properties are of these digital objects, and what sorts of metadata can be stored along with them. We also analyzed the legal aspect of news apps. To collect this information, we used web surveys, interviews, and reading through code. The second goal was to apply open source technologies to preserving one application, Dollars for Docs, see what works, and try to generalize that process to all of news apps. In this process, we aimed to discover what was available and where the technology was lacking in serving our purposes. All in all, we found that news apps generally are made up of these 3 main parts, and via our analysis, we were able to determine the most commonly used technologies that were applied to each of these areas. We also noticed a tendency in the news app developer community to build apps within the dynamic backend portion to the left, then turn everything into static files to publish and live entirely within the elements to the right on the client side. In our analysis of what constitutes the significant properties of an application, we noted that even when an app appears on the web as a series of static files, the environment in which the work is actually developed must also be considered a significant piece of the object, as this is the portion below the surface in which all of the journalistic value is added. The server architecture in which this environment is set up can also be considered the boundaries in which the application exists and be the focal point of preservation efforts. And with this in mind, we wanted to find a method of preservation that would support those needs. Using Dollars for Docs, we performed a case study applying various technologies to the process of preserving apps. These included things like static site generators. However, the most promising technology thus far has been ReproZip, an open source software created by PhD students at NYU Tandon. This software can package a piece of software along with the environment in which it was developed, and the package can be transferred and run within any operating system. It was built for scientific reproducibility. However, we believe with some modifications, it can be applied to news apps. And we've been working with the developers to apply ReproZip to dollars for docs to validate this assumption with promising results. Our analysis of the current state of apps and their legal situation found that no news app development team has a strategy for preserving its work. We also found that the majority of apps are proprietary and therefore off limits to the memory institutions that are interested in preserving them. So while the technical challenges to this venture are significant, the institutional could be considered more so. An effort to solve this problem in its entirety will require first a clear understanding of this issue within newsrooms, and then cooperation between memory institutions and the organizations that create news apps, which is the model we put into practice with this project. I would like to thank the team at ProPublica for allowing me access to their apps. I would like to thank Meredith Broussard and Katie Boss for all of their help and mentorship throughout this process. Of course, Jay, Zoe, my parents, and my awesome classmates at Studio 20. A write-up of this research will be published in the near future, and we hope to continue making progress on this issue. Feel free to email me if you have questions or are interested in hearing more. Thank you.
Well, we don't usually think of digital journalism as having a past because we're always focused on it going forward. But Ava's project is about preserving innovative and ingenious solutions in digital journalism's past. The thing that I love the most about it is it's a pure public good. We're just doing it because it should be done and doesn't really need any more of a reason than that. Eric, are you ready?
Yeah.
Go.
Cool. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to discuss my thesis project, which I called Media Relationship Status Engaged, done in partnership with Fusion and their audience development team. In digital journalism, audience development teams analyze data to better connect content to their audience. In some newsrooms, this team is called audience engagement. The terms are often used interchangeably, and the practices for one are sometimes misinterpreted as the practices of another. But it's important to keep in mind development and engagement are not the same thing, but rather opposite sides of the same coin. Audience development is about acquisition, reaching new members and getting them on site. Audience engagement is about retention, getting those members to become return visitors who are loyal to your site. You do this by maintaining a relationship with them, and since no two audiences are alike, this takes as many forms as there are media organizations. When researching how to build a relationship with Fusion's audience and increase brand loyalty, we wanted to know how we could measure the quality of an article, how our audience was engaging with content, and what insights could be drawn from the responses. When setting out to answer these questions, I established a golden rule. Don't focus on the same metrics used for audience development. The reason being that development metrics are actually measuring the social packaging of an article and not the article itself. This practice also serves advertisers more than our readers. The article here, for instance, has more page views than any other piece of content on Fusion, but that doesn't mean that it was read the most. So when Fusion's weekly Insights email goes out with recommendations for improving content in an effort to retain those audience members, writers and editors often struggle to act on those insights. This is because the data does not relate to the content they produce, and it doesn't fall into a journalist's writing process. Instead of tracking content quality to retain audience members, we refocused on comments, listening for what Fusion's audience is looking for in a media relationship. We wanted to answer, what do users want to do once our content is in front of them? What are our missed opportunities for that deeper engagement? And how can we build strategies around that engagement? We found that Fusion's audience is looking to make an impact on social issues, and this is an opportunity that we missed. Perla Del Mar is a transgendered immigrant living in poverty and running a shelter in her home for refugees along the US-Mexico border. Our audience members commented under the video asking how to support Perla. One person even replied to Fusion's own comment, and it all fell on deaf ears. Eventually, one of our other audience members chimed in with a link to Perla's shelter where other members could then get in touch. If Fusion, though, could meet that need and anticipate it, it would allow for more meaningful impact to be easier and more accessible. It would also encourage audience members to become engaged. This article is another example of the audience's desire to make an impact, this time where he sees the opportunity. Coverage of the Dakota Access Pipeline consistently drives traffic and lower-level engagement with comments showing anger or concern, but on this article, in which we listed ways to help protesters, the comments showed thanks and praise. Some of them even thanked us by saying, "Yes, Fusion, more of this." So in listening to Fusion's audience further, we found that issues most important to them were as follows. For justice, the Dakota Access Pipeline and immigration reform. For sex and life, reproductive justice and sexual assault on college campuses. And for voices, racial biases and LGBT issues such as transgender legislation. With these issues identified, Fusion can seize opportunities that would have been missed in the past and begin to engage their audiences on a deeper level. And these are my recommendations for how to do that. Maintain our journalistic objectivity by directing audience members to multiple impact opportunities. For instance, with Perla's story, we would include her shelter in a list of places and organizations that support Mexico's queer and transgender community. For issues related to social biases rather than legislation, invite audience members to share their story. For example, firsthand accounts of Islamophobia or mental health stigma. These responses would then be published as content, thus raising the volume around an issue and giving the audience a sense of ownership around Fusion's journalism. This can also be done by publicly recognizing comments or embedding them under articles or pinning them under Facebook videos. This also means replying to comments directed at Fusion, notifying members if their comment is used as a story pitch, and asking users to act as sources for future stories. Next, you want to gather data around that impact content, where those engagement practices are being used. This would be done by creating a WordPress tag to label that impact content and custom reports from Google Analytics and Chartbeat. From this data, Fusion's growth editors can draw engagement insights and make actionable recommendations on how to nurture Fusion's relationship with an audience member. These insights would then be communicated through a new engagement section in the audience development team's weekly insights email, which you saw earlier. Impact content should also be packaged with series branding for featured images and video thumbnails. This has proven to increase engagement for our competitors and has been successful for Fusion in the past. It would make content easily distinguishable from other pieces of content, and it tells the audience, read this or watch this and find how you can make a difference. Allowing Fusion's audience to have an impact on these issues, making engagement part of the editorial process, and habitually listening to what they're saying are the first steps in getting our audience to change their media relationship status from single to engaged. I want to thank Fusion's audience development team, especially the growth editors who mentored me during my internship there, and Brianna, who's somewhere over there. I could not have done this without her. I, of course, want to thank Jay and Zoe, my friends and colleagues in Studio 20. We're all talented, and if you want your media organization to be more relationship-oriented instead of a player, talk to me and we'll figure out how to do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. A very smart teacher I had once said, when in doubt, draw a distinction. And Eric's study is built on a distinction he drew between audience development and audience engagement. Audience development is getting people to know your site. Audience engagement is keeping them there by giving them what they came for. And he built his whole project on that one crucial distinction. Chief Anna, you ready?
Yeah.
Go.
Hi everyone, this is my Studio 3 project partnering with the Huffington Post. China, the world's most populous country, also has the largest and fastest growing online user base. More than half of its population surfers the internet, outnumbering the entire United States population 2-to-1. However, because of the censorship, especially the Great Firewall, users in China experience the internet very differently from the West world. Your URL is blocked. Facing this giant digital market, it's not easy for American news organizations to reach Chinese audience. But due to the changing digital world, The news industry in China shares a similar evolving path as the Western world. News consumption in China shifts the same way as here. China has WeChat, Weibo, Baidu in comparison to Facebook, Twitter, Google. Youku supports virtual reality just as YouTube does. This new ecosystem is more friendly and fair to foreign news companies than before. The distance between them and Chinese readers is narrowing. Nevertheless, they still lack knowledge of Chinese audience when considering to expand their business in China. My project, the Chinese Media Landscape Guide, helps Western news brands position themselves in Chinese digital market and engage their audience. My partner, the Huffington Post, has a global vision. Its global expansion started from Canada 5 years ago. It now runs 17 different editions. Half of their site traffic comes from outside the United States. It aims at building a global newsrooms. All the editions share their contents, resources, and benefit each other. The Huffington Post started its experiment in China this May. Articles from the Huffington Post were translated into Chinese and distributed on WeChat, the Chinese Facebook, which dominates the Chinese digital world. Publishing news on WeChat is similar to a combination of newsletter and Facebook instant article. Users follow accounts, receive posts, and read within app. Users can also comment and share what they read. My first plan was to test different editorial and packaging strategies on WeChat in order to improve performance and engagement. But something unexpected happened on September 29th. When several Chinese media news sites reported Huffington Post distribution on WeChat, the platform felt overexposed and specifically limited the authority of the Huffington Post account. The first step was now blocked. Having setbacks is common in Chinese journalism world. It doesn't mean you to give up. Instead, you seek other ways to succeed. So I shifted my project a little bit to something with long-term impact, and that is what my partner urgently needs now. Now, under my suggestion, a Weibo account will be registered soon. More contact with potential partners are undergoing. My final report for them turns into a list of 12 recommendations with different priority. World news, American politics could be the best selling point. Entertainment news has a great potential. Reporting China is a necessity and a key to success, but the choice of topic need to be properly considered. Neither too risky, which can lead to a block, nor too cautious, which can lead to be getting ignored. Considering the internet use base of China, some smaller platforms have plenty of users as well, and among which engaging conversation around Huffington Post already existed. To write this report, I did a WeChat test, which was interrupted late September. Besides, I interviewed Chinese journalists and several foreign media's Chinese editors. I also did analysis on dozens of platforms to generate the conclusion. Altogether, 4 types and 14 news brands were selected to be studied, including how they run business in China, their focus audience group, their image in Chinese readers, and their success efforts. On WeChat, New York Times registers its education vertical only, but uses it to cover politics most of the time. The Wall Street Journal literally says they target rich people to attract an audience. This part is valuable for better defining the Huffington Post position in Chinese media market and evaluating what degree of risk they are going to take to meet their long-term goal. Finding a local media collaborators is Huffington Post's global strategy, and they are starting to search for their Chinese partner. In China, some big tech companies already have several collaborations with American media, such as Tencent, the owner of WeChat, collaborate with ESPN, Vox Media to help their brands enter China. On the other hand, choosing a local newsroom may have less risk, more editorial control, and benefit from partners' reporting strengths. And this is not limited to picking one of 2 problems, since the tech companies in China are working more closely with big newsrooms in recent years. There are some more findings come out from this research. Following the official instructions may sound like common sense, but in Chinese media world, it's not always true. Among the WeChat accounts showed a few seconds before, none is verified officially, but all work well. However, Huffington Post drew unwanted attention and was limited because of its formality. And always keep an eye on Facebook. While struggling with fake news, it may introduce a censorship tool anytime and back China. After my recommendations, I'm happy to see that my partner decided to execute on some of my lists. Chinese audience may be able to see more Huffington Post content on multiple platforms next year. China is not totally unreachable. Many foreign media have great success there, and as the digital world evolves, more opportunities will emerge in this tempting huge market. I'd like to thank all these wonderful people. Without their help, I'm not able to get here. If you want to know more details about my study or for me any suggestion, welcome to contact me. Thank you all.
Yifeng is from China, working with the Huffington Post in the United States on how to enter China. And the editor that he collaborated with at the Huffington Post is a Studio 20 graduate from China, working in New York on the Chinese edition of the Huffington Post. So can you tell why I love this project? It's our global network coming to life, and every year it gets bigger. Our final presentation is Kim. Kim, are you ready?
Yes, I am.
Take it away.
Hi, I'm Kim, and I'm going to show you how live video is becoming a powerful tool for user engagement and news gathering.
We got pulled over on Larpener.
This Facebook Live video is arguably one of the most important pieces of citizen journalism. It shows the minutes after Philando Castile was shot by a police officer in Minnesota this summer, filmed by the fiancé of the dying. As it went viral, the video got picked up by the news media and has since spurred the national debate about racial injustice. Up until this day, it has been the most prominent user-generated live video. It surely won't be the last. When it comes to live video journalism, most people, you perhaps, think about journalists going live themselves. But while many newsrooms are experimenting with producing live content for social media, it shouldn't be limited to that. User-generated and user-guided live video is also a valuable news-gathering resource for journalists. With user-guided, I mean incorporating questions and comments of the users. Taken together, I call live video a tool for user-powered journalism. I've been carving out opportunities and challenges of working with it, as well as a range of suggestions how to improve it. I started my project with the media partnerships team at Facebook this summer by working on a social news gathering survey. We made an interesting discovery. Already 2/3 of the almost 200 journalists questioned answered they search for live streaming video at least sometimes when they look for user-generated content. The problem was, while many newsrooms experiment with the new technology, they hadn't shared their insights much. I've interviewed 20 journalists and live video experts in order to help Facebook and the industry as a whole to better understand how user-powered live video is used as a tool in newsrooms, and here's what I found. As I had assumed, Facebook Live is the most dominant one of all live streaming services they're using. Journalists also find Periscope especially useful when they're looking for user-generated live video. Only a few work with other live streaming services like Bamboozer and Ustream. User-generated live video already is considered an invaluable resource for journalists. You often get footage you would never get any other way, one journalist told me. Like this one of the hunt down of the Munich shooter. It doesn't necessarily have to be very unique footage to be useful though. User-generated live video can also help to monitor an ongoing news situation, inform the reporting, and get witnesses. It's about better understanding what's happening. The protests against the Dakota Access Pipeline, for instance, provided plenty of opportunities for that. Oftentimes, when there's no correspondent on the scene yet, citizens with their smartphones are. Live video produced by journalists can benefit a lot from user guidance. If done right, it can foster user engagement, it can be used as a new entry point to a story and reach a bigger audience. At the same time, journalists can gather what people are interested in, for example, in an Ask Me Anything format. User guidance can also assist in the investigation and enrich the reporting. Like in this New York Times example called Fragments of a Life. The reporter on the left side here asked the users to help her solve a mystery of a trash bag full of photo slides that she found on the street. This kind of user-assisted reporting hasn't been tried with hard investigations, and I think it's about time for that. But there are some problems journalists are having. Discovery of user-generated live video is one of the biggest of them at the moment. Journalists often have to rely on their conventional tools for that, if not on pure luck. A few of them use Facebook's live map, but wished it allowed to zoom in closer. This is the closest you can zoom in around New York City, though there are some ways to work around it, for example, by searching through geographic coordinates. As for user-guided live video, newsrooms often struggle to work with comments. Sometimes there are too many to keep up, sometimes they're not enough, and sometimes they're very mean. It's proven useful to have at least one more person in a newsroom to help produce the live stream and moderate the comments. Calling the commentators by their name is another way to lead conversation in a more positive direction. Not at least, lost signal can be a huge problem when working with live video, especially in protest situations. Phone networks sometimes scramble due to oversaturation, or perhaps even due to authorities that interfere with the connectivity. Platforms like Facebook can't do much about that, but they might be able to improve their live streaming tools. The people I talked to had plenty of suggestions how to improve live video as a tool for journalists, for example, better keyword or location search options. I will share these suggestions with Facebook in more detail in the coming weeks. Meanwhile, live video on social media already is a rich resource for journalists and a strong asset for user engagement. I think it should be in the toolkit of any newsroom, yet I found it still widely underused. As more and more users will get familiar with the technology, their power of generating and guiding news content will strengthen. There will be more videos as important as those of Philando Castile's death, the Munich shooter, and pipeline protest. The more journalists know about the opportunities and challenges, the better journalism will be. I summarized my research in a post for First Draft News, which you can find on a landing page today, or by following the short URL. And if you would like to share your experiences with live video or hear my findings in more detail, please reach out. Thank you.
Thank you. And while Feli starts to get Josh ready for his presentation, we're going to do a quick couple other things. First, you may have noticed that each of these students is thanking Zoe Fraud-Bonar, our technical advisor. I'd like her to stand up and show herself. She is a key person in Studio 20, helping us teach these students how to negotiate their projects. She is herself an expert in user testing and design and has a technical background that many of our students do not, and so she's an invaluable resource for us. I also mentioned a brief news announcement that we have, and it's that every year we do a big project with a major news company. Last year it was Fusion and election coverage. In the past, we've partnered with The Guardian on a semester-long project in the spring and ProPublica. And next year in the spring of 2017, our partner is going to be the Wall Street Journal. And we have Greg Emerson here, mobile product manager for the Wall Street Journal. And I'm going to ask him to quickly jump up here and tell us about this project.
Thank you. Shall I sit down? No, I won't take your chair. Sure. Thanks, Jay. So most people probably know the Wall Street Journal for our industry-leading financial coverage and business news. And increasingly, though, people are coming to us for other reasons, for our coverage of US news, politics, and world news. What we've also seen in some user surveys and market research is that some people feel intimidated by the sophistication of the journal's financial coverage. So what we realized is we have a suite of products that are targeted at the financial experts. They're called pro-level, WSJ Pro sites, and they give you an added level of analysis and deeper data on some of the financial topics that we cover every day. What we don't have, though, are a suite of products or solutions for the more novice end of the financial literacy spectrum. So we're incredibly excited to work with Jay and Zoe and the current Studio 20 fellows to deploy their immense and deep skills and talents as sort of a research and testing lab to help us at the Journal come up with new ways to engage readers who are a little bit less financially literate and to provide more of an on-ramp and lower the barrier to entry to our core financial coverage, which is some of our deepest and most expert analysis, and of course some of the things that most shape the world that we all live in and even the politics that we see developing around us every day. So we are not just looking at how do we get millennials to engage with our content, because millennials are not one big homogenous group. There are very financially literate millennials and there are less financially literate young people. So it's important for us to devise new products or persistent strategies that are not just aimed at creating different content for young people, but rather finding ways to allow everyone to access our core coverage a little bit more easily and expand the audience that can really benefit from what is one of our most expert and deep areas of coverage. So we are very much looking forward to it, and we'll look forward to sharing the results with you at the end of next semester or next year at this event, maybe. Thank you.
My shorthand for that project, Business News for Dummies. That's what we're doing. We're going to one more thing, and then we're going to let y'all go. I just want the students to come back up, everybody on the stage, so we can salute you. This is their final hour as graduate students. Come on. Applause.
Okay, awesome. We're adjourned.
Yes.
Zoe, come up on stage.
Yes, Zoe.